In the heart of a suburban enclave where uniformity reigned, one home stood out like a vibrant jewel amidst a sea of drab greenness. Its yard was not just a patch of grass, but a carefully curated canvas of lush colors, deep emeralds, bright limes, and subtle golds that danced under the sun. This was the pride of Sophie Morgan, an unassuming middle-aged woman whose passion for lawn care went beyond mere aesthetics. It was an art form she meticulously nurtured. Sophie had spent countless weekend mornings researching, experimenting, and ultimately perfecting her enriching blend of fertilizers and herbicides. Neighbors often marveled at her lawn's brilliance, some turning green with envy, yet most maintained polite smiles while adhering strictly to the HOA's guidelines, which dictated a more subdued approach to landscaping. The meticulous care Sophie lavished upon her property stood in stark contrast to the conformity imposed by those resolute community rules. But Sophie found joy in her vibrant patches stretching across her yard, feeling an adrenaline rush each time someone complimented her hard work. Every spring, she reveled in unveiling shades only she seemed to know about amidst lines of subdued grass, a celebration of individuality that spoke deeply to her rebellious spirit. However, this celebration wasn't always reciprocated. For too long, whispers circulated among the eve-leaning HOA board regarding the visual disruption Sophie's lawn presented. While the community's annual flower show saw monotonous rows of petals and tamed landscapes, Sophie's audacity bloomed brightly like wildflowers through asphalt cracks. Some residents appreciated her display as a sign of freedom, others muttered discontent behind closed doors. That particular summer brought with it an unexpected storm. No longer were those whispers innocent musings. A surprise HOA inspection left Sophie breathless when she received an official notice outlining hefty fines for maintaining excessively vibrant grass. The committee deemed her lawn not just disruptive, but an affront to their vision for homogeneous aesthetics. Dismay washed over her as the fine hovered like a dark cloud above her creative expression. What no one knew was that beneath Sophie's humble exterior lay a secret. She owned Greenhaven Corp., the very company supplying lawn care products to nearly every homeowner in the subdivision, including the house of none other than Harold Finch, the imposing president of the HOA himself. As anger bubbled within, Sophie contemplated vengeance but resisted the urge to confront the board directly. Instead, she devised a plan, not one forged through bitterness but crafted through clever ingenuity. What if she could make them taste their own medicine? With determination twinkling in her eyes, she resolved to adjust product deliveries strategically across specific lawns, especially those belonging to certain board members. This decision ignited a bittersweet strategy that would turn restrictions into freedom and reveal just how precarious their power truly was. The morning of the surprise HOA inspection dawned gray and foreboding, with heavy clouds hanging low over the neighborhood. Sophie Morgan was tending to her beloved lawn, humming lightly as she watered the carefully cultivated patches of vibrant green grass. Each blade glistened with moisture, a testament to her tireless dedication, yet little did she know that this very dedication would soon become the source of her turmoil. As she finished her watering regimen, a cluster of official-looking vehicles rolled into the cul-de-sac, vehicles adorned with the unmistakable HOA logo. A knot formed in Sophie's stomach. She had heard whispers about inspections, but never imagined they would target her yard. Clad in crisp polo shirts and armed with clipboards, the inspectors fanned out like a fleet sent forth to impose order. Sophie held her breath as they approached her home, their scrutinizing eyes flicking from the lush expanse of her lawn to the more muted hues of neighboring yards. The air thickened with tension as she offered polite greetings, trying to mask her growing anxiety. She could feel their critical gazes lingering longer than usual on her garden, her masterpiece, each moment amplifying the sense of dread that crept along her spine. The lead inspector cleared his throat loudly, cutting through the uneasy silence. "Ms. Morgan," he began, his voice carrying an air of authority that sent chills down her spine. "We have conducted our inspection and regrettably must notify you that your lawn has been categorized as excessively vibrant." What? Her heart sank as he continued, delivering the words that would shatter her pride. "You are hereby fined for maintaining grass deemed visually disruptive in comparison to other properties in this community." Sophie felt the weight of each word pressing down upon her like a leaden cloak. The fine was hefty enough to drain months' worth of hard-earned savings. The inspector's stern expression revealed no hint of sympathy, while Sophie stood frozen in disbelief. This was not merely about aesthetics. It felt like a personal attack on her identity and creativity, a blatant dismissal of everything she cherished about being different in a world that often celebrated conformity. In those moments following the announcement, all she could hear was the pounding of her heart against silence as shock reverberated through her thoughts. How could vibrant grass be so offensive? She glanced at nearby homes, lawns devoid of character or color, and made sense of why hers had become a target. A couple of neighbors exchanged wary glances. Some looked sympathetic, while others barely masked their delight at seeing Sophie in distress. Anger surged within her but was quickly quelled by an overwhelming wave of helplessness. Each step back into her home felt heavier than the last as she clutched the fine like a badge of shame, a proclamation that beauty had no place among code-driven suburbia. She was determined not to let this stand unchallenged. Somewhere deep within stirred a rebellion ready to unfold against rules that stifled individual expression in favor of bland uniformity, an urge stronger than any fine could extinguish. Determined to confront the HOA's unfair stance, Sophie Morgan retreated into her garden, where she found solace amidst the riot of colors that had underpinned her identity for years. Still reeling from the inspector's shocking condemnation, she needed to gather her thoughts and rally her determination. It was during this moment of reflection that a powerful realization washed over her. She had a secret weapon. Sophie had spent nearly a decade building Green Haven Corp., a thriving lawn care company specializing in premium products designed for those who wished to elevate their outdoor spaces. She prided herself on creating innovative fertilizers and herbicides that promised lush greens and rich colors, yet she kept this aspect of her life tightly wrapped in confidentiality. To her neighbors, she was merely the local lawn enthusiast. Few were aware of her role behind the scenes, producing sought-after supplies that many relied upon to maintain their yards, including those very HOA board members who now came seeking conformity at the expense of individuality. This veil of anonymity served a dual purpose. It shielded her passion while allowing her to influence landscaping decisions quietly from the inside. As indignant as she felt about the fine, she couldn't shake off the excitement brewing within. What if this was the moment she could reclaim not only her own right to express her creativity, but also empower others around her? The more Sophie pieced together her thoughts, the more fevered they became. With every passing moment, she envisioned a plan that would allow her to turn the situation on its head. What if instead of taking punitive revenge against rules imposed by those who didn't appreciate true artistry, she adapted her strategy to make a statement about individuality? This thought perked up the corners of her lips, a mischievous smile spreading across her face where fear once resided. The idea began forming like clouds gathering before a storm. By manipulating the very products supplying lawns throughout the neighborhood, particularly at homes belonging to key members of the HOA, she could orchestrate a symbolic rebellion against their conformist ideology. As those designated lawns began to fade and seek attention through visible patches and lackluster growth, they would become an orchestra of desperation. In preparation for executing this plan, Sophie made mental notes about which formulations would work best for different lawns, carefully tweaking elements in ways that would encourage nurturing and maintenance while also dialing back vitality. She envisioned their disappointment juxtaposed with flourishing landscapes elsewhere, their attempts to impose conformity inadvertently triggering an awakening among residents. With purpose igniting in her chest, Sophie steeled herself for what lay ahead. Each action would not just reveal her true identity, but also bring forth a community yearning to embrace vibrancy and creativity, rather than mute them in gardens confined by rigid rules. She yearned for justice not just for herself, but inevitably for everyone whose expression had been stifled within these hues of gray standards set by another's vision. With the weight of the HOA's fine pressing heavily on her mind, Sophie Morgan found herself engulfed in a storm of conflicting emotions. She oscillated between anger and disbelief, grappling with how to respond to what felt like an unjust attack on her passion for lawn care. While a part of her yearned to storm into the HOA meeting and demand justice, a deeper voice whispered caution, urging her to think strategically rather than react impulsively. Sophie wandered into her garden once more, seeking solace among the brilliant hues that had come to symbolize her defiance. The vibrant grass beneath her feet felt like a connection to her identity, reminding her that beauty should never be stifled. Yet, as she marveled at her handiwork, she knew that direct confrontation would only heighten tensions and likely result in further penalties or isolation from her community. Instead, inspiration began to blossom within her, an alternative approach formed in the recesses of her mind. What if, she mused softly to herself, I didn't just fight back. What if I changed the game entirely? This idea ignited a flicker of excitement amidst the anxiety swirling within. Rather than being reactive and hostile, she could be clever and calculated. As Sophie paced among the flowers lining her path, she envisioned a plan that could shift dynamics quietly but effectively. She would leverage her hidden identity as the owner of Green Haven Corp., using it to orchestrate a form of rebellion, not against the entire neighborhood, but specifically targeting those who had enforced restrictive standards without regard for individuality. Her mind raced as she formulated the details. By subtly tweaking the formulas of lawn care products delivered to key HOA members' homes, those whose opinions held sway over community decisions, she could spark noticeable changes in their lawns. The thought sent a thrill through her. Not only would this challenge their authority, but it could also reveal just how hollow their claims about community aesthetics truly were when pitted against real artistry. Sophie understood that this plan required both finesse and discretion. She couldn't afford any slip-ups. If anyone discovered her intentions prematurely, it could ruin everything. She needed to time each adjustment perfectly while ensuring that the discrepancies showed up at strategic moments. A patchy lawn here, wilting patches there, until they drew enough attention to force HOA members into crisis mode. The more she contemplated this strategy, the more confidence surged within her. Instead of allowing herself to remain characterized solely as a homeowner with an extravagant lawn, she would become a catalyst for change, a symbol of self-expression amid conformity. By transforming what was once perceived as rebellion into something educational for other residents, Sophie aimed not just for victory, but also for enlightenment, showcasing that vibrancy can coexist beautifully with community standards. As she finalized these thoughts in her mind, an invigorating sense of purpose took hold of Sophie. She was ready to reclaim not only her lawn, but also redefine what it meant to belong in this neighborhood, a bold statement that would echo far beyond any single piece of grass. With a newfound sense of purpose fueling her actions, Sophie Morgan prepared to put her plan into motion. Rubbing her hands together as if warming them by an invisible fire, she leaned over the workbench in her garage, surrounded by beakers and an array of chemicals employed in her lawn care products. It was here, away from prying eyes, that she would initiate her calculated sabotage. Sophie meticulously analyzed each formula for the fertilizer and weed killers that were ready to be shipped to the homes of HOA board members. With every tweak she made, she maintained an air of professionalism, reducing essential nutrients, altering proportions, even introducing a slow-acting herbicide that would initially go undetected but could lead to devastating results down the line. The tweaks were subtle enough to evade immediate notice, but potent enough to create a growing disparity in lawn health. She wrote down specific notes for each board member's delivery while maintaining careful attention to detail. For the HOA president, Harold Finch, whose pristine garden had always been the envy of neighbors, she decided on a combination that would weaken his grass without alerting him right away. It would take time, but soon those lush green blades would begin showing signs of weakness, a patchiness here, a wilting there, until his once immaculate yard started looking like an unfortunate reflection of Sophie's own. As the days turned into weeks, Sophie watched with both excitement and anxiety. The once smooth transition from vibrant green to sickly yellow across lawns linked to the board members began to unfold. It was an intricate dance, plant life converting sunlight into sustenance, slowly giving way under a botanical assault designed specifically for those enforcing conformity at the expense of creativity. Sophie kept her identity shrouded in secrecy, while ensuring each adjusted shipment went undetected in its intended destinations. She greeted neighbors with a friendly smile and casual chatter about gardening, all while knowing that their ornate backyards were about to turn into battlefields against short-sighted rules imposed by the very people who led their community. The first sight of change came when Mrs. Green, an HOA board member known for her passionate involvement in neighborhood aesthetics, began posting concerned messages on social media about the state of her lawn. Is everyone else experiencing this? Read her anxious post, alluding to strange patches appearing in her once impeccable grass pure enough to make even royalty blush. Others soon chimed in. Whispers among families hinted at troubling occurrences across multiple yards. Behind closed doors of the HOA meetings, unease settled like a heavy fog as members discussed their failing lawns and increasingly disgruntled neighbors. Conversations swirled around accountability, who bore responsibility for this sudden decline. As suspicions mounted within the board's inner circle, Sophie fought to suppress her laughter. The moment she had envisioned since embarking on this journey felt imminent. As panic began breaching their rigorous facade of control, Sophie knew it was almost time to step out from behind the curtain and reveal herself, not just as a homeowner fighting for her freedom, but as a catalyst orchestrating it all from the shadows. Her name may have been absent from these complaints until now, but soon it would define a movement against conformity that would change everything for their community forever. As the days turned into weeks, the once pristine lawns of the HOA board members began to transform into a patchwork of unsightly browns and yellows. The vibrant greens that had defined their properties faded under the subtle changes Sophie had orchestrated, leading to a slow but noticeable disarray. It was as if nature herself conspired against those who sought to suppress individuality, forcing them to confront the results of their narrow-minded rules. Harold Finch, the imposing president of the HOA, was among the first to notice the distressing decline in his yard. What had once been an enviable expanse of lush grass now bore patches as dry and brittle as autumn leaves. Frustration coursed through him like electricity. He felt blindsided by this sudden turn of events that seemed incomprehensible. Throughout neighborhood meetings, he'd often bragged about his lawn care practices, touting his success as a model for others. Now, standing on his own uneven turf, he felt exposed and vulnerable. At first, Harold attempted to rationalize the situation. He told himself that it must be an isolated incident. Perhaps it was due to a lack of rain or even some pest infestation plaguing his prized landscape. However, as whispers spread through the neighborhood and fellow board members began sharing similar grievances about their failing lawns, panic set in. Mrs. Green's garden was now riddled with bare spots, while Mr. Johnson complained that weeds were sprouting where none had dared before. The dread gripped them all. What could possibly be happening? Inside the quiet rooms of HOA meetings, tensions rose like steam in a pressure cooker. Each member found themselves at a loss for answers. Conversations turned heated as fingers pointed in frustration. Who was responsible for this chaos? Some suggested hiring a professional lawn care service to diagnose their issues, while others argued that they needed to scrutinize their current suppliers more closely. The sense of helplessness filled the air with an uneasy energy. As despair took hold among them, Sophie kept her facade intact amid their growing desperation. With every complaint she overheard at gatherings or social media posts shared lamenting about dead patches or wilting blades, she felt a mix of satisfaction and trepidation churning inside her. This was not merely revenge. It was an awakening, a prompted realization for those who had enforced uniformity over creativity. Mrs. Green's frantic social media posts began turning into calls for action, urging neighbors to unite against whatever invisible threat loomed over their lawns. "Is anyone else experiencing this?" became her rallying cry as more residents responded with similar stories of woe, a validation that something sinister lay beneath their carefully curated community standards. Sophie refrained from engaging too directly in their discussions, but couldn't help but feel excitement bubbling within her at how close they were teetering on a precipice of chaos, brought forth by their own rigidity. Each complaint served as fuel for her purpose. Every frail blade of grass marked another step toward revealing herself and redefining what lawns and landscapes truly meant within their community. The time would soon come for her transformation from a mere homeowner into a beacon calling for liberation, the embodiment of what it meant to reclaim beauty from constraint and elevate individuality above conformity in the heart of suburban life. As anxiety rippled through the HOA board members over their wilting yards, Sophie prepared for her moment to step onto the stage she had quietly engineered from behind closed doors. As the situation among the HOA board members worsened, news of the declining lawns began to make ripples beyond the confines of their tightly controlled neighborhood. Concerned residents, witnessing the rapid transformation of their friends' once vibrant gardens, started sharing posts on social media, sharing pictures of dying grass and filing complaints, which soon morphed into a growing buzz. The story of uniformity crumbling under the weight of vibrant individuality captured the attention of local news outlets eager for engaging narratives. Amid this turbulence, a reporter from the town's most prominent newspaper caught wind of the discontent brewing in the neighborhood. Setting out to investigate, she arrived with her camera crew while residents gathered in clusters, animated discussions swirling around. Sophie watched from a distance, her heart racing as she saw cameras focusing on familiar faces echoing sentiments of surprise and frustration towards their disappearing lawns. "Has anyone else noticed their landscaping going downhill?" Mrs. Green lamented loudly during an impromptu gathering outside her home, her expression marred by disbelief. It's like something is deliberately messing with our yards. Her words were noted by the reporter, sparking renewed interest in the peculiar plight plaguing these once competitive lawns. With each passing day, media outlets descended upon the neighborhood with increasing fervor, capturing interviews and live footage of residents grappling with mysterious patches in their gardens. As cries for help spread through interviews broadcast across television screens and streamed online, Sophie's anticipation reached new heights. Little did they know that their search for answers was leading them deeper into the very heart of the problem itself. Is this a case of sabotage? One news anchor speculated during a live segment, referencing the sudden rise in public unrest over grass aesthetics reduced to mere anarchy. The phrase echoed through social channels. #GrassGate became a trending topic as locals and outsiders alike engaged in debates about HOA practices, conformity, and self-expression. For Sophie, this was the perfect backdrop against which to reveal her identity as the orchestrator behind these unfolding events. She could feel ideas bubbling to the surface. Soon the walls surrounding her fight would be torn down, not just within their homes but across public spaces, drawing in others who felt stifled by authoritarian standards imposed by bodies like the HOA. As emotions among residents intensified, frustration morphing into outright defiance, Sophie knew it was time to strike while public interest peaked. She needed to host a gathering where she could step forward not just as a passionate homeowner, but also as an empowered individual claiming space for creativity against conformity. Notably emboldened by witnessing how togetherness had birthed strong communal spirit amongst neighbors yearning for change, she spent hours planning specifics for a public gathering at the neighborhood park, a prime location ripe with symbolism reflecting growth against adversity. Invitations went out through social media channels and community bulletin boards announcing an event they could celebrate not only as homeowners, but as individuals embracing their freedom to flourish uniquely rather than simply conforming. When a diverse crowd from all corners of their subdivision crowded beneath blossoming trees one crisp Saturday morning, Sophie felt electric anticipation pulse through her veins. This would be her stage, where she would unveil herself not merely as a rebel against stifling rules, but as a voice for everyone who believed in returning color and vibrancy to their lives. And this time, all eyes would be on her as she took center stage. Every rebellion starts with a single blade of grass. Sometimes, timing changes everything, just like subscribing to this channel seems to cause HOA panic and spontaneous lawn protests. But back to the story. As the community buzz escalated, desperation settled heavily over the HOA board members. With their lawns visibly declining and no end to the chaos in sight, panic turned into action. They could no longer afford to ignore the mounting cries of their constituents or the plummeting aesthetics of their own properties. Discussions, once filled with bravado and control, devolved into frantic brainstorming sessions, each member grasping at straws, searching for solutions that seemed to elude them. In an uncharacteristic move, Harold Finch called for an emergency meeting. He set up a press conference, hoping to publicly appeal for help from lawn care professionals while emphasizing the HOA's commitment to community integrity. Cameras flashed as he stepped up to the podium, his demeanor strikingly serious as he urged residents to report any issues with their landscaping products. "We are committed to finding a solution for this troubling situation," he declared, a touch of desperation creeping into his voice. "If anyone has insights or advice on how we can restore our beautiful lawns to their former glory, we encourage you to come forward." What Harold failed to realize was that among those watching intently was Sophie, a figure shrouded in the shadows yet central to this unfolding drama. Her heart raced as she observed the board members' plight broadcasted across screens, each expression betraying a blend of frustration and vulnerability. Their pleas for help were laced with irony. In seeking assistance from outside sources, little did they know they were inviting guidance from the very person they had unintentionally wronged. Within hours of the announcement, residents began discussing potential interventions online and within neighborhood groups. Perhaps a collaborative approach involving local experts or open forums for sharing gardening tips and strategies would provide answers. Amidst this backdrop, Sophie recognized that not only did these discussions signal an opportunity for her reveal, but also demonstrated a fledgling unity among her neighbors, one that could amplify her message far beyond her singular lawn. Feeling emboldened by the mounting unease among HOA leaders and newfound solidarity among residents, Sophie drafted her own statement intended for publication at the upcoming event she had planned, a gathering centered around reclamation and renewal in their community. She wanted it clear: individuality held more value than rigid conformity. As anticipation grew ahead of the event, dubbed the Great Grass Rebellion, more residents turned out than she ever expected. Garden designers showed up eager to share their wisdom on fostering unique landscapes amidst zoning regulations, while emboldened homeowners rallied together in support of artistic expression through lawn care. Sophie's moment was finally approaching. She stood backstage at the gathering site feeling both exhilarated and anxious. When it was her turn to speak, she confidently approached the microphone positioned before a sea of sympathetic faces, neighbors who had faced hardships because of sameness rather than celebrated diversity in views and styles. "Thank you all for being here," Sophie began, her voice steady despite trembling hands. "I've been quietly listening as you voiced your concerns about our community's identity being washed away beneath restrictive rules." The crowd stirred with recognition. Cheers erupted as they realized she was speaking directly to their struggles. Before revealing herself fully alongside her intentions regarding individual expression, Sophie intended first to galvanize support for something larger, a commitment against uniformity in favor of embracing authenticity within their shared space. It was time not just for her debut, but also for a new chapter in their neighborhood, a chance to reclaim autonomy over personal landscapes and reframe what it meant to belong in their suburban haven. As applause reverberated through the air like music resounding off vibrant garden walls, Sophie knew this was just beginning. Together, they would redefine everything this community represented moving forward. The atmosphere at the Great Grass Rebellion gathering was electric, filled with anticipation and hope as individuals from the neighborhood gathered under the wide expanse of the park's canopy. Colorful banners swayed gently in the breeze, emblazoned with slogans about individuality and freedom. Sophie Morgan stood backstage, her heart racing in time with the thrum of excitement reverberating through the crowd. She knew that this moment would be pivotal, not just for her but for everyone who had felt stifled by the HOA's rigid rules. As she stepped onto the stage, a wave of energy surged through her. The murmurs of the crowd quieted into a reverent hush, all eyes on her. With confidence bolstered by the unity she witnessed before her, she began her speech, addressing their shared struggles and aspirations. "Thank you for coming together to celebrate our uniqueness," she declared, her voice strong and unwavering. "We've allowed conformity to dictate our lives and our landscapes for too long." Cheers erupted from the audience as she spoke passionately about embracing individuality and creativity, values she believed made their community vibrant rather than uniform. However, she knew it was crucial to unveil her true identity at just the right moment. As she reached the climax of her address, Sophie paused, taking a deep breath. "But I stand before you not just as a fellow homeowner or an advocate for change. I am also the person behind what has unfolded in our community over recent months," she revealed, locking eyes with those in attendance. Gasps rippled through the crowd at her words. "I am Sophie Morgan," she continued, letting the weight of her name resonate in the air. "I am the owner of Green Haven Corp., the very company whose products have affected many of your lawns." Shock swept through the gathering, a mix of disbelief and intrigue. Before anyone could react too strongly, she raised her hands for silence. "I know this comes as a surprise and perhaps even betrayal, but my intention was never to harm but rather to spark a necessary conversation about our community's values." She paused again, gauging reactions from both supporters and skeptics alike. What started as a movement against stifling norms became an experiment in reclamation, an attempt to bring back color and vibrancy in places overshadowed by restrictions, she elaborated. "The discomfort many of us experienced is a reflection of how conformity can suffocate creativity." Expressions shifted among attendees as realizations dawned, some feeling anger for being duped, while others expressed understanding and support for her audacity. The mundanity of their lawns, once held up as a standard of beauty by the HOA, was now subject to critique as they grappled with their rigid adherence to arbitrary rules. Sophie continued passionately about collaboration, inviting residents to consider what their community could be rather than succumbing to uniformity imposed from above. As murmurs of agreement filled the air, she outlined her vision for reforming landscaping regulations that would celebrate diversity instead of quashing it. At that moment, it became clear that this wasn't merely a revelation. It was a rallying cry for collective empowerment. As calls for change echoed back at her from the crowd, Sophie felt a surge of hope wash over her. This rebellion was not solely about lawns or flowers. It symbolized reclaiming ownership of their shared identities and spaces. With renewed vigor, she knew they were ready to embark on this journey together. Together, they would redefine what it meant to flourish in their neighborhood, a movement born from struggle that now blossomed into a vibrant tapestry reflecting each unique voice within its borders. As the echoes of applause settled and excitement rippled through the crowd, Sophie Morgan realized that this was not just a moment of personal triumph, but an opportunity to reshape the future of her community. With the audience still buzzing from her revelation, she seized the moment to push for real change. Stepping forward once more, she took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts before addressing the crowd again. Today marks not just a rebellion against conformity, but a chance to redefine our community's values, she declared, her voice resonating with conviction. We need landscaping guidelines that reflect our individuality, the very essence of who we are as homeowners and neighbors. There should be room for creativity, diversity, and expression, and yes, even vibrant grass. A wave of agreement surged from the crowd. Heads nodded in enthusiastic support as some residents shouted affirmations. Sensing their eagerness for change, Sophie continued, "Let's work together to establish new landscaping guidelines that prioritize fairness for everyone, rules that encourage us to express ourselves and celebrate our unique identities rather than stifle them." The energy shifted from mere support to a palpable determination as Sophie outlined her vision. She proposed creating a committee composed of residents, garden enthusiasts, landscape architects, and regular homeowners alike to collaborate on crafting guidelines that would allow for a variety of lawn aesthetics, instead of limiting them to standardized norms dictated by a few individuals. Picture this, a neighborhood where vibrant gardens bloom alongside traditional landscapes, a tapestry of colors that reflects our community spirit, she exclaimed, painting an evocative picture with her words. The crowd erupted into cheers once more as the reality of shared responsibility dawned upon them. Sophie then suggested they hold regular town hall meetings where ideas could be exchanged freely and where residents could pitch their unique landscaping concepts without fear of reprimand or harsh judgment from an overbearing board. Let's establish criteria that embrace artistic expression while also ensuring that we all maintain a respectful cohesion, because we can have both creativity and visual harmony. As murmurs of agreement spread through the gathering like wildfire, some in attendance began discussing their landscaping dreams openly, buoyed by the possibility that these dreams could soon become reality. The atmosphere transformed from one marked by conflict and trepidation to one brimming with hope and excitement. Sophie called upon her fellow neighbors to take charge of their community's future, not just passively accepting what had been handed down, but actively participating in shaping it together. This is our chance to stand united. Let's empower ourselves to create something beautiful, a place where each resident can truly thrive in their own way. With renewed enthusiasm coursing through her veins, Sophie felt exhilarated by how rapidly momentum had shifted. Together, they were becoming agents for transformation against archaic rules imposed on them. As voices rose in unison chanting phrases like "freedom in our gardens" and "diversity is our strength," it became clear that this was no longer merely about lawns. It symbolized reclaiming control and community identity from restrictive standards. This pivotal moment marked the birth of a new chapter, one where empowerment flourished amidst vibrant foliage, and Sophie knew they were poised on the brink of significant change together. As the buzz from the Great Grass Rebellion spread throughout the neighborhood, local media outlets quickly seized upon the story, branding it a remarkable clash between individual expression and community standards. News cameras and reporters flocked to the area, eager to capture every angle of this evolving narrative fueled by Sophie Morgan's bold actions. Headlines declared, "The Great Grass Rebellion, a fight for freedom in suburbia," drawing in viewers from surrounding towns curious about the growing movement. Within days, social media erupted with posts featuring vibrant lawns juxtaposed against the backdrop of their more traditional counterparts. Residents began sharing personal stories of their struggles with HOA regulations, recounting how conformity had suffocated their creativity and passion for gardening. Hashtags like Grass Rebellion and Lawn Liberation trended as individuals shared images of colorful flowers and diverse landscapes that defied the HOA's constraints. As the media spotlight intensified, interviews with residents revealed a spectrum of emotions. Many expressed admiration for Sophie's courage in challenging an authority they felt had long silenced their voices. "For too long, we've been held back by rules that don't reflect who we are," one neighbor stated passionately during a news segment. "Sophie is giving us a way to reclaim our individuality." Conversely, some HOA board members were portrayed as out of touch, unable to comprehend the concerns of the very community they governed. Harold Finch, visibly shaken by the mounting pressure, found himself defending outdated practices that now seemed increasingly untenable in light of public opinion. Amidst this frenzy, Sophie emerged as a symbol of change, a beacon of hope for those feeling trapped in a landscape dominated by uniformity. Her efforts were not just about lawns, they sparked broader discussions about self-expression and community identity. The media coverage painted her as a grassroots hero, a champion for homeowners seeking to reclaim their rights from rigid governance. As Sophie navigated the unfolding media landscape, she recognized the power of storytelling in shaping perceptions. She participated in interviews, articulating her vision for a community that embraced diversity while fostering respect among its members. "This is not just about grass," she emphasized during one such interview, "but about creating spaces where everyone feels free to express themselves, where our homes can reflect our true selves." Public sentiment shifted dramatically as more residents rallied behind her cause, leading to organized discussions about potential changes in HOA regulations. Sophie proposed regular forums where homeowners could voice their opinions on landscaping choices without fear of repercussions, spaces that would encourage collaboration rather than division. The media followed every development closely, highlighting not only Sophie's advocacy but also the inspiring community response. Coverage continued to grow as residents began attending neighborhood meetings en masse, eager to share their ideas and collaborate on crafting new guidelines that celebrated every homeowner's unique vision. By framing this conflict as not merely an issue of lawn aesthetics but a fundamental struggle for self-expression and community empowerment, Sophie transformed the narrative into one of hope and possibility. The Great Grass Rebellion became a catalyst for change, embodying a movement that resonated far beyond their suburban enclave, a testament to the power of individuals uniting for a common cause. As momentum built, it was clear that together they were poised to redefine what it meant to belong in their community once and for all. As the dust settled from the Great Grass Rebellion, Sophie Morgan stood before her neighbors, reflecting on how far they had come together. The atmosphere was charged with hope. Vibrant banners still fluttered in the park breeze, a reminder of their collective determination to reclaim their community. This was more than just a battle against the HOA, it had become a movement towards resilience and collaboration. Sophie took a moment to embrace the faces around her, fellow homeowners who had once felt stifled by conformity and now radiated newfound confidence. "What we have accomplished here today is not just about changing landscaping guidelines," she began, looking out at the crowd that had rallied behind her vision. "It's about acknowledging our shared power to shape our community." Her heart swelled as she continued, "This journey has taught us that resilience lies within each of us. We face challenges that threaten to diminish our creativity and individuality, yet we chose to stand together rather than succumb to fear or despair." The audience responded with nods and murmurs of agreement, the energy palpable as they absorbed her words. Sophie recognized this as an opportunity not only to celebrate their victory, but also to foster ongoing dialogue between homeowners and the HOA. "We must ensure that our voices remain heard moving forward," she urged passionately. "Let's commit to regular meetings where we can discuss ideas openly, where every resident feels empowered to contribute their vision for our shared spaces." The concept of dialogue resonated deeply within her community. They had seen firsthand how communication could bridge gaps and facilitate understanding. As she spoke about forming a committee dedicated to crafting new landscaping guidelines reflective of their diverse identities, excitement rippled through the crowd. This would be an inclusive effort, one where every homeowner's input would be valued. "Individual expression doesn't have to conflict with community standards," Sophie asserted, reinforcing her belief that both could coexist harmoniously. Through collaboration, they could create a vibrant tapestry of unique landscapes while still nurturing respect for one another's preferences. Together, we can foster an environment where creativity thrives. Sophie concluded by inviting everyone present to engage not just in discussions about lawns, but also in broader conversations around identity, shared values, and community spirit. Each member of their neighborhood had a role in sculpting what it meant to belong, not merely as residents under an HOA, but as contributors to a living canvas filled with expression and authenticity. As she stepped back from the podium, applause erupted once more, a chorus of support echoing through the park that mirrored her own enthusiasm for this new era of collaboration. Sophie felt invigorated knowing that they were all willing participants in reshaping their future together. In that moment, she knew they had rewritten the narrative, not merely transforming lawns, but redefining what it meant to thrive within a community bound by mutual respect and individuality. The Great Grass Rebellion marked not just an end, but a beginning. It would lead them into uncharted territory filled with possibilities for growth and connection rather than conformity. As attendees embraced one another and exchanged ideas animatedly, Sophie smiled warmly. Their journey toward empowerment was well underway, heralding a brighter future grounded in resilience and unity amidst diversity.